Hi, folks. I'm back. This is attempt number 2 at Facebook Live. My apologies. I was getting some feedback that the video wasn't working, but I'm going to go ahead and soldier on and try again. Okay, so I'm going to offer you 5 tips about COVID and kids. The first tip is that you want to talk openly about the coronavirus with your children. Now, obviously, this is going to look different depending on the age of your children, but I'm very grateful that we have lots and lots and lots of resources available online that can give you some tips about how you might frame it with your kids. So for instance, with my preschool age children, I talk to them a lot about how there are a lot of people who are really sick right now. And because of that, we need to stay at home as much as possible and do everything we can to be safe from the germs. That involves things like not touching our face and things like washing our hands regularly. It's also really important that you limit media exposure. This is actually not only helpful and healthy for your children, but it's healthy for you as well. You want to only be accessing high quality media like reputable sourced media and news. And you want to be making sure that you're talking to your kids about what they're seeing and hearing on the news related to COVID. There are so many tools right now that are available to kids and families when it comes to explaining this. And I'm going to list some of them in the comments when and if I successfully complete this Facebook Live. There's one in particular that I love. It's a YouTube video and it's called Time to Come In Bear. And it's about social distancing for young children. In addition to talking about the virus itself, you also want to be talking about the consequences of COVID with your kid, because just as we adults are having to weather through many different changes in our day-to-day lives, so are our kids. You know, I talk to my kids a lot about who they're missing and what they want to do when the people who are sick are better. They often want to talk about their friends. They want to talk about their teachers, their school, even family members that they miss dearly and that they can't be visiting right now because of COVID. So you really want to be an open ear for your kids and be willing to let them really open up to you about all the different things that they're feeling. And I've noticed that a lot of the families I work with have gone through stages where maybe initially it was kind of exciting to be home. And I think none of us could have predicted that it would last as long as it has. Okay, my second tip for families is that you are spending quality one-on-one time every single day with your children. Children of all ages really benefit from and thrive when they get one-on-one time with their parents, guardians, or loved ones every day. During this time, you really just want to follow your child's lead and be an open ear for them. This is a time that can be just a wonderful opportunity to build relationships with your child and maintain that attachment with your child. And I often remind myself, especially at the end of a long day, that what my kids are going to remember about this quarantine period and this COVID crisis is hopefully the time that they got to spend with their parents and their loved ones, even though a lot of their activities were disrupted. So dedicated one-on-one time, it only has to be a few minutes every single day, is really critical. You know, our kids can feel the tension around the pandemic, and we just certainly want to make sure that they're getting a sounding board every day and just a lot of compassionate, open comfort from their loved ones. Okay, so my third tip is that it's really important to implement a structured routine every day. So I don't like to call it a schedule because a schedule sounds a little too rigid, and I know that these are times that call for flexibility, But there are a couple of benchmarks that you really want to be shooting for. And this applies to kids all the way through teenagers and older teenagers even. So consider your child's sleep schedule, for instance. Young children need between 10 and 12 hours of sleep, high quality sleep, every night. And really, this sleep should occur during nighttime hours, and wake up time should occur during daylight and daytime hours. So it's easy for our sleep schedules to get really wonky while we're on quarantine, and for us to just take long naps throughout the day, but then stay up real late. And that is really not optimal for children. They need a long period of consolidated sleep. That's when their brain actually grows and heals from all the things they've done throughout the day. And so getting them on a consistent schedule is really important. And this also applies to teenagers. A lot of teenagers are surprised to hear that they really thrive on 9 to 10 hours of sleep at night, every night consistently. And so now is a great time to implement that. Eating is also an important part of the structured routine. So you want to make sure that you're having balanced, nourishing meals during the quarantine to the best of your ability, and that you're eating as a family together at the table as often as possible. It's also really important to be moving your body and to get outside every day. Being outside in nature is in and of itself healing. We have decades and decades of research to back that up. And so that's just a really important component of every single day. The last thing I want to touch on when it comes to a routine is that you want to be at least thinking about your children's screen time. And as many parents are aware, the American Academy of Pediatrics has set forth some recommendations of about 2 hours a day or less of screen time for kids. Now, that doesn't count as academic time. So if they're on their tablet, for instance, doing their homework, that doesn't count toward the 2 hours. But I think it would be safe to say that many of our kids are definitely going over that dose of 2 hours a day. So this is one where you really need to find a balance. You know, there are times where I just absolutely need screens so that I can get some things done around the house, for instance. And in those moments, I try to be thoughtful about the kind of programming that my kids are watching or what they're doing behind the screen of a tablet or a TV, so that at least it could be something enriching. If they're going beyond their allotted or preferred amount of time per day. Okay, so my fourth tip for kids and COVID is to manage child behavior, both related to COVID and unrelated to COVID. So again, as many of us have sort of settled in, maybe some new problem behaviors have emerged in our kids, or maybe we're asking our kids to engage in behaviors that we've never really stressed to them before. So for instance, I'm finding myself talking a lot to my preschool age children about how intensively to wash their hands and how to wipe their face off if they have an itch on their face without touching it with their hands, for instance. The very best way to change behavior or to alter behavior, and believe it or not, this is true for adults as well as children, is using positive reinforcement principles. So in other words, rewarding your child for the kinds of behavior that you like your child to be engaging in is the best way to ensure that that kind of behavior will be repeated or will continue. So I'm doing a lot of praise in my house for washing hands. If I catch one of my kids coughing or sneezing into their elbow instead of into their hand or into just the empty air or the space in the air, then I'm going to praise them for that. And I praise them when they're able to use more effective means of itching their face, for instance, other than touching it. Praise is also really helpful if you can use it in advance of some bad behavior. So for instance, if I can see one of my kids kind of ramping up and getting ready to engage in a naughty behavior, and I can catch them before that takes place and praise them for not doing the naughty behavior, for doing the opposite behavior instead, then that's something I want to be trying to do as often as possible. Setting up sticker charts, by the way, for these kinds of behaviors is especially effective. So, for instance, we've got a sticker chart right now going in my house, and one of my children, he really loves our dogs, but the way he demonstrates his love to our dogs is not a way that's preferable to our dogs. He's like squeezing them and trying to ride them and things like that. And so every time I see him engage gently with one of our dogs, I immediately call him out on it. I praise him for it. I tell him how much I like that about the way he interacted with the dog. And then I give him a sticker on his sticker chart. And I've seen that behavior shift pretty dramatically just in a matter of days since changing my approach a little more to be proactive instead of reactive. When it comes to bad behavior, it's really important that you try to find ways to redirect the behavior and that you set up really clear consequences for your kid when they're engaging in bad behavior. So the worst thing you could do is make a threat and then not follow through on it. You want to really keep your promises to your kids, and they need that, especially right now. They need to trust you emphatically. Believe it or not, it's a relief to kids when parents follow through on what they say they're going to do with behavior. Also, when it comes to punishment for kids right now, I think it's really important as a parent for you to tune in to how you're feeling during the moment that you need to enact a punishment or a consequence for your kids. Because if you're feeling really kind of out of control or beyond stressed out, it may not be the best time for you to give a consequence to your kid. You may lose control, or it just may get away from you in a way that you don't feel good about later, or in a way that doesn't align with your parenting values. And so I think it's great advice when you have those moments, and all parents have those moments, by the way, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, to take a moment and take a pause and take a breath and consider coming back to the situation or returning to the problem that you're facing with your kid when you're perhaps a little more cool-headed and relaxed and can really think it through and feel good about the parenting decision that you make. Okay, the fifth and final tip for COVID and kids, it really doesn't directly affect kids. It's about the parents. It's so important to take care of yourself as parents or caregivers or guardians in this moment. We are really shouldering the weight of the world right now. And many of us are understandably trying to protect our kids from a lot of the stress that we're feeling. So maybe that means that you need to decrease the dose of news or media that you're taking in, that might be helpful to you to decrease your level of stress. There are wonderful relaxation scripts online. I'm going to post some in the comments when I finish. And I can't recommend enough taking just 2 or 3 minutes a day to just kind of tune in and do a little bit of mindfulness, relaxation or meditation. It's also really important to connect with others. I had a wonderful opportunity over the last weekend to check in with 2 different groups of friends that I haven't talked to or seen in a long time. And boy, those check-ins, those virtual hangouts, they really filled me up, because I'm sure all of us 4 weeks into the quarantine are really feeling the effects of the quarantine right now. It's also really important to ask for help. If you're desperate and you're really kind of losing your cool with your kids, reach out to people who are in your support group. If you're a member of our church, I'm sure you're well acquainted and familiar with Lisa Calderwood. She's our youth director. And I have personally reached out to Lisa a couple of times during this quarantine, or I've given my phone to my kids and let them FaceTime with her and just taken a couple of minutes to myself. And that has been just an amazing gift as a parent, to just get a couple of minutes to catch my breath. And I guess the last thing I would say about taking care of parents is just to give yourself some grace. No one is giving out awards for the best parent during the quarantine. I think we're all just aiming to try to stay afloat and to get through this together as best we can and to maintain our resilience. So maybe that means you need to lower your expectations a little bit about your abilities to teach your children all the material that's assigned to them every day in the service of maintaining good relationships with your kids instead. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to list a bunch of resources in the comments after I finish the live stream. But I especially love the ones from the American Psychological Association. I've got some great ones here from the Child Mind Institute as well. And then, of course, locally, if you're local to West Virginia, I would really encourage you, if you're feeling like you're kind of reaching your limit with your kids, or if your kids' behavior has been really difficult to manage, or if your kids are really anxious or getting sad about all of this or depressed, I would encourage you to reach out to your primary care doctor or provider, or to your pediatrician. That's the person who's going to know your family and know your kids best and can point you towards some behavioral health resources. The behavioral health workforce is up and running. We've been conducting virtual services for weeks now. And so that's definitely an option if you're feeling like you're kind of out of gas at this point. Okay, so I'm looking at this point to see if there are any comments that I can address from you. I'm not seeing any thus far, but in all honesty, I don't know where to look. Let's see. Okay, no questions. All right. Well, certainly if you do have comments or concerns, if I'm able to answer them, please just list them in the comments on the live stream, and I'll go back to look at them. I apologize for my initial ignorance here with Facebook Live. But I hope that you found this useful, and I'm grateful that you decided to look in on the First Presbyterian Church of South Charleston website. Hopefully once we get back to regular services, I'll see you folks there. Take care.